morning, everyone. On behalf of all of us at UKZN, I extend a cordial welcome to Professor Rupert Ward. Welcome to South Africa, to Durban and to the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I also extend my gratitude to the University Teaching and Learning Office, Dr. Danpat, Jasper, Vasu, Sli and Badru for all their support in organizing this seminar and also for hosting Professor Ward. I am humbled to be given the opportunity to introduce my colleague. Professor Rupert Ward is a former special advisor to the HRH, the Duke of York, KG and project lead for the Duke of York, Inspiring Digital Enterprise Award. He is a National Teaching Fellow and Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. He co-authored the university's highly successful assessment and feedback strategy and has been part of teams recognized nationally for assessment and feedback, student experience, customer service excellence and enterprise. Rupert is Professor of Learning Innovation and Associate Dean International within the School of Computing and Engineering. He is a board member of the Council of Professors and Heads of Computing and a member of the BCS Accreditation Committee, a Fellow of the British Computer Society and the Chartered Management Institute, a Chartered Engineer, Chartered IT Professional, Chartered Manager and Chartered Scientist. In the highly volatile higher education environment that we are situated in currently, we all understand the need to introduce and integrate technology seamlessly into the curriculum rather than viewing it as an add-on or an afterthought. However, we also need to take cognizance that technology itself is a useful servant, but as Christian Lang states, it is also a dangerous master. In this light, Professor Ward will engage us in a seminar on the use of technology to enhance blended learning approaches in education. He would like this session to be as interactive as possible, so if you have any questions or would like to interact with him during his presentation, please raise your hand so that Lingani can bring the roving mic around to you as this session is being recorded.
So I'm going to go through quite a few ideas within my presentation. It's not going to last 2 hours, okay? So what will last 2 hours, though, is if we have an interactive session amongst ourselves, okay? So what I want is, as we're going along, if there are things that you start thinking about that you want to question, you want to ask, you want to know more about, let's go through it as we're going through there. And I'll manage the time so we can always progress on or move back to things. And we've got some time at the end to talk as well. But basically, I know, as I was just chatting with one of you beforehand, I've been here half an hour, okay? So I don't know, I know next to nothing about your university and what you do. So the things I'll propose are things that I think are manageable. And basically, it's more about a mindset than it is about the specific solutions. So you need to be able to contextualize that yourself, and you need to be able to communicate that to me so I can understand what is possible and what isn't possible. Okay. I was given a set of questions, which you'll be able to see on here. And what I've tried to do with these questions is boil them down into three main questions, really. Why, what, and how. So the first two questions are, why are academics reluctant to use technology, even though it's easily available at no cost? And why students don't find the time to watch multimedia materials online? Okay, and effectively those two areas are really to do with engagement and motivation. So I'll talk about issues to do with engagement and motivation. Second one is if they do use the materials, does this improve their understanding of key concepts? And should entire lectures be captured in classrooms and distributed? Well, those are really about what do we provide in terms of learning materials and how do people learn. So I'll talk about how people learn. And tied in with that, what the behaviours are that are useful to effective learning. And then the third area is the general benefits of using video recorded lectures and distributing them online, and how you can make video materials interesting in the way that you produce them. So that's really about what we do with it, how we apply it, how we integrate it into what we do, and hopefully how we inspire. Okay, so that's the areas I'm going to cover. If there's anything that's not in there that you think should be in there, then obviously feel free to contribute to that as we go along. But that's going to be the main thrust of what we talk about. Most of this is going to be conceptual. Okay, so most of this is going to be making you think and hopefully think differently about how you do things. It may be things that you already think, maybe things you fundamentally disagree with. Feel free to discuss those with me. Okay, so when I think of education, I generally think of this. So why do I think of this? Let's get the interaction going. Why do I think of this?
Hugely enthusiastic, but then good trip. Can't go over the first hurdle.
Can't go over the first hurdle. Okay, right, that's one way of seeing it. What else could you see in that picture?
So maybe education is fast-paced, but we seem to come unstuck at some point. Okay,
so there's challenges, there's things that we struggle with. Okay, anybody else? What else do you see there?
And the constructive education, there's a series of hurdles that you're supposed to kind of...
Right. Okay, a series of barriers. Okay, so if you're very fit, you've got very long legs, yeah, you've trained a lot, it's fine, you can manage that. Usually, you might trip up, but you're usually okay. Okay? It requires a lot of effort. Okay? And beyond that, if you're stood at the beginning of that line, looking to run and jump over those hurdles, it can be quite daunting, particularly with short legs like me, okay? And you might not even start. You might not even think, okay, I'm going to get on that racetrack and I'm going to jump those hurdles, okay? So the first thing before we get anywhere else is you need to understand from the learner perspective how they engage with learning. Okay? What is it that allows them to buy into it? Okay, and I'll use a few analogies today that are very simple ones, but give you a really good understanding of what we need to think about when we're thinking about learning. Okay, so I'll come back to those concepts in a bit.
Another suggestion, I think, is
important
lesson in that image there is the people that are tripping are the ones in the lead. And one of the biggest things we've seen in technology is the people that rushed in the earliest. Think of the classic Los Angeles iPad failed program, etc.
Yeah.
They've been the big trips, and while technology's been around for a while, there's something that you need to think about before you race in. And so the guy that's taking it a little bit slower is actually looking like he's going to do better in the long run.
You can see how the others are falling over.
Exactly. So the fact that you're not in it and you haven't digitized, that's okay. You've got to start the race, but it's not necessarily the one who's going to be in the front is going to be the winner of the race. So I think hold back a bit, and sometimes that's
an excellent point. And also, let's go a bit further with this analogy. One hurdle at a time. Okay, so think about each hurdle, think about how you're going to get over it. So incremental use as well. Excellent, that's brilliant. I'll use that one in future, thank you. Okay, second thing. Okay, what do you see? Why is this image up here? Putting a seatbelt on, probably a wise idea. Okay, let's start with that. Okay, so...
You must be so prepared, everything in place so that nothing can go wrong.
Yeah? Okay, so, the valid point, right? So, what we have generally, if you look at Carol Dweck's work, for example, on mindsets, is fixed and growth mindsets. So, certain people, they want to be safe in their education. They don't want to try and do, coming back to the previous one with the hurdles, they don't want to try something new because if they fail, they fail. Okay, it's about their judgment of themselves. Okay, if they've got growth mindset, they don't mind failing because it's not personal to them. It's not about them failing. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that's one thing. What else? Go on. Yeah.
That all means nothing if you don't know how to drive.
The what, sorry?
So that all means nothing if you don't know how to drive. So you can be sitting there, if you don't know how to use the equipment, it's a failure anyway.
Okay, so do you drive?
I do.
Okay.
I did.
So, imagine you're getting in there for the first time.
Yep.
Talk me through the experience.
Well, if you know how to drive, you know firstly you need to worry about your safety, and then of course know how to turn the machine on.
Yeah.
And then know how to use it properly for you to get the desired results.
Okay. So the first time you got in a car, though.
You have to start it. Put your safety belt on, or put your safety belt on first. Start it, and then put it into gear to move forward or go backward, depending on what the desired results.
How did you find driving when you first got in a car?
You have to learn to drive. You can't
Was it easy? Was it difficult?
Overwhelming.
It's overwhelming.
Overwhelming.
Right. It's overwhelming. Why is it overwhelming?
The options, too many things, kind of master simultaneously.
Okay.
You don't know what to do.
You don't know what to do.
Taught.
Okay. Right, and we'll come back to this as an example. Okay. Okay. How many of you have been driving for 10 years or more? Feel free. Okay. How many of you in the last year have driven somewhere and got there and had absolutely no idea how you got there? Okay. That might be an age thing, but it's possibly also because you don't need to think about it anymore. Okay, so we'll come on to that. We'll come on to how you learn. Okay. Okay. So really useful. Well, you'll see. Really useful analogies. Okay. Okay. Next one. We'll stop in a minute. We'll go on to some actual stuff in a minute. But I like pictures are good. Pictures are good. Okay. So cake, salad, cake, salad, cake, salad. Who's going for the cake? Who wants the cake? Okay, who wants the salad? You have to have Right, there you go. Right, and that's the issue, right? So, I don't believe the ones that say they want the salad. They want the cake, right? Okay, and what's happening here is you have two systems in your brain. Okay, you have a impulsive system, which basically does pretty much everything. Okay, and you have a analytical system, a system that you think about things. So you know this is better for you than this. Okay? But unless the structures are right, you'll always go for the cake. Okay? Because your impulses take over. Okay? And you delude yourself that you're actually doing the right thing. Okay? So, here's an interesting thing for you to think about. Let's say you're going shopping. Okay, you're going shopping with these two things, and you'll see where this is relevant in a minute. I'm not just going to talk about food all the way through. Right. If you went shopping each day, you'd buy the cake every day. Okay? If you go shopping every 3 days, let's say, what you do is you buy the cake and you buy the salad for tomorrow. Because your intention in the future is to do a good thing. The reality now is you'll go with the vices. Okay? Okay. So we'll bring that back to learning in a minute. Okay? It's important that you understand the person. Okay? This is all about understanding the person, understanding how you're then going to implement stuff on the back of the person. Okay. So I was asked to put some various references or bits that you can read in here. So the last bit, the cakes and the salad, is from Kahneman's work. Kahneman, Nobel Prize for Economics, the last few years. And basically what his research is, it basically allowed economists to see how we interact with the markets more effectively, okay? But it's incredibly useful within a learning context, okay? So, as I said, you've got an impulsive system, an automatic system, and you've got an analytical system. So coming back to the driver example, okay, one of the things that we can look at, and it'll come in the model in a minute, is how we go from thinking about driving, analytic system, really hard work thinking about things, okay, really hard work, to automatic, you don't have to think about it anymore. And learning is the process of going from one to the other effectively. Okay. So, these slides are obviously available. You can have a look at this afterwards. Another thing to think about in terms of those examples is some work done by the Behavioural Insights team within the UK government about 5 or 6 years ago, where basically they were looking at ways of changing how social security and various related services were managed, and how to influence behaviour in people so that they did things they should do. Okay, right? And so basically, the book Think Small is about how you change people's habits. Now, these habits can be applied to learning. Okay, so if you want people to develop the right learning habits, manageable steps, plan, and use small rewards to incentivize. Okay, so if you want your learners to learn in a certain way, you need to think about what rewards you put in place to allow that to occur and how they are going to buy into that process. Okay? Right, okay, so let's go on to the questions. Why academics are reluctant to use technology even though it's easily available at no cost. Why students do not find the time to watch multimedia materials online. They don't do it because it's a burden. It's a hassle for both parties. Okay? It's a perceived burden. Okay? They think in their mind that this is going to be harder than it potentially is. Okay? So what you need to do, break it down into manageable steps. Get them through that initial barrier. Do something small that gets their buy-in. Then use virtuous circles to build that up. And in doing that, what they do is they internalize the habits. So they change how they see something. So let me share something with you at this point because it's relevant. It's not because I'm trying to show off. A couple of years ago, I set myself a 6-pack challenge. Okay? And basically, all I did to do that was I changed my habits. Okay? So one of the key bits in that is diet. Okay? And diets, 95% of diets fail within 3 years. Why?
They're not a habit.
Not a habit. They're a burden. Okay? So what you do is you change your eating routine. You change what is your default way of eating. So it's not something that you're doing that is a sacrifice, that is a burden. You do something that then becomes easier to do than not to do. Yeah? You understand? Yeah? And same with the exercise. Okay? I never used to do that much exercise. Once you get into the routine of doing the exercise, once you have set times or set routines of doing things, suddenly the burden is not to do it, not to do it, not to do it. All right? Okay? You get it? So when you're thinking about the learning process with the learner, you have to understand how to get them to adjust those structural issues to allow them to learn most effectively. That's the most important thing, right? Because if it's a challenge, if it's a barrier, if it's something where they're having to make an effort or they're perceiving that it's harder than it is, they won't do it. Okay? So you can put all the effort you want into it, you know. So to take the gym analogy a bit further, if you are somebody who is obese, right, you don't say to them, come to this high-intensity gym class. Okay? What you do is you say, okay, well, let's start with diet. Let's start with getting you losing a bit of weight. Okay? Let's start with something that you can manage, that's an adjustment that you can keep permanently. you build that in. Then you start getting some benefit. Then they start getting some confidence that actually they can do this. And then they can start moving forward. Okay? Okay. So I know the examples I'm using are not in learning, but you can see exactly the same points in learning. Okay? So manage the burden issue. Coming back to motivation, what's in it for them? Why should they engage? So if you're looking at using a technology, okay, it's no cost to them, but it is a cost to them. It may not be a financial cost to them, but it's a time cost, it's an effort cost, they're having to think, okay? And we don't like to think. It uses up calories, okay? 25% of our calories at rest are feeding this, okay? And if you start thinking, it's more, okay? So we tend not to think, okay? So make it easy for them to think and to learn. What are they going to get out of it? Okay, now, so obviously you can use social pressures to encourage them. If somebody else is doing it, you can encourage them to work with them, or they can see the benefit that others are getting out of it. But it's not just about providing, it's about thinking about how they're going to internalize it. Okay, and then for the students in particular, what habits do they have? Okay, so if you're saying, okay, we can produce this multimedia stuff, but they never watch it. Okay, well, they probably never watch it because that's not their habits. That's not what they're used to learning through. Or they're just not used to learning. They're not fit. They're not learning fit. Okay, so then start with that. Start getting them into the habits and routines that then they can start accessing it. Yeah? You know, so if you want them to do particular gym classes, get them fit enough to do a gym class before you engage them with it. Okay. All right. Hopefully you get the point from there. Okay, so that's the first part. You need to think about appealing to the person and getting them to buy in, because if you don't, the rest of it's a waste of time. So the next bit is, okay, having got them buying in, what are you going to do with them? How are you actually going to get them to learn effectively? Okay. So the two questions there were, if they do engage, does this improve their understanding of key concepts? And should entire lectures be captured in classrooms and distributed? Okay, so on the back of that, what we're going to do is we're going to talk through a model of learning so you can really see what all the things are, what the components are that are going on. Okay. And then we can either deal with these questions as we're going along, or we can deal with them at the end. Okay, so basically this is how we learn. So those that know how a computer works, this is very similar to how our brain works. Okay, this is a simplified model. Okay, if you've got a neuroscientist doing this, they'll probably rip me to shreds on this. Okay, but it'll get all the points across. So you have input. The input is the environment. You have long-term memory. That's where you store the information. And you have working memory, like random access memory in a computer, and where the processor is effectively as well. Okay? So basically, your working memory is where you take stuff from the environment, stuff you already know, and then basically take the new stuff and the old stuff and make sense of it. Okay? So that's where you think, and that's where you learn. Okay. So what you're effectively doing in your working memory is filing things. That's what you're doing when you learn. Okay, so you're taking all this stuff that's coming in, you're taking what you already know, and then you're working out, okay, how do I make sense of that, and how do I organize this in my brain so I can store it and I can get it back? And what you do within that is you go through a process of analyzing, using your Kahneman's system 2, the analytics side, to automation, where it's internalized as habits and the connections are already there. So when you try and retrieve it later, it's already there. Okay? And you go through 3 processes on there. So first one is you use abstraction. So you come up with a conceptual way of seeing something. Okay, so see if any of you did this. I asked somebody yesterday about this, and I suspect you don't do it in South Africa. But when you were taught about electricity, did anybody use an analogy for teaching you about electricity in school? Too long ago. Okay. Well, there you go. Okay. 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 Need to reboot. Switch off and on. So, okay. In the UK, a lot of places use a water analogy. So what they say is that electrical circuits are a lot like water flow around a water circuit. Right? So the current of water is the same as the current of electricity. Okay? The resistance is like the pipes getting narrower. Okay? And the voltage is like the pumping it round. Okay? So if you've not seen that or heard that analogy, then okay, you would have learnt it in a different way. But the point being is, having understood how water works, you already know, when you get this new information about electricity, you can use what you already know conceptually, and then you can file the information knowing that it's analogous to something else. Okay, so A, it makes it easier to learn, because you've already got an example that you can work off, and B, you've got an effective way of filing that so you can retrieve it. Okay, so what you do is you take the conceptual understanding and you build structures, constructs, so filing arrangements. Okay, and through those you can then apply it, so you develop your habits. Okay, so let's take the driving example. Okay, so you start off, you have absolutely no idea what you're doing, and then you start understanding how it works. Okay, so are most of your cars here automatic or manual? Manual. Okay, right, so manual car, what's the key things you need to know? You need to know it's the clutch. It's all about the clutch. Okay, so if you didn't understand that, you just think all the three pedals are equal. You know, just stick down the accelerator, go into a wall. Okay, so what are the key points? Okay, and this is where the speed of learning is effective. Okay, if you can be better at abstracting, you can be better at learning. Okay, because you can think through and organize quicker, and you can retrieve quicker. Okay, so driving, it's all about the clutch. Okay, so you need to know where the biting point is, then you can control the speed of the car, and the other two bits you'll sort out. Okay, so you get that information, you work out how that information connects together, so you build the construct, and then you start applying that and develop the habit using those concepts. Okay, right. And so what happens is something that was really hard becomes really easy. And also what it does then is, when you're using it in working memory, it becomes far less intense experience. So you have freed up your working memory, which is limited, to do other things. So you can take a telephone call in the car, you can daydream, you can chat, you can have a drink, stick your head out the window, whatever. Okay, you can do other things because what was hard has become easier. Okay? And if there's information associated with that, you obviously write it back to your long-term memory and you got it. Okay? Does that make sense? Any queries with that model? Okay. Right. So, when you're thinking about both academics, well, staff in general, and students learning, you need to think about how they're doing these things. Okay? So, really, you need to know about them, because you need to know how are they going to abstract things? How are they going to apply that to their existing learning? You know, so I was saying I want this to be interactive because I don't know about your university. So I can't learn how to develop my mental models of how to apply it here without knowing about what you already have. Yeah, and similarly with your students, similarly with your staff. So before you do anything, you know, it's obvious. Just know who you're dealing with and how you're dealing with them. Okay? Okay, right. We can come back to this if we need to. So, we can change habits. As I said, I decided to get fit a few years ago. Before that, I didn't. Okay, now it's routine. It's easier to do than not to do. Yeah, I'll carry on doing it for the rest of my life. Okay, and we can do that within learning. Okay, we can also revisit how we see things, how we organise things. So hopefully today is revising your constructs, for example, of learning, what learning is. Okay. I already touched on this. We need to understand the context of the learner and the learning. Okay, so you can't do it in isolation. Okay, so let me go on to a few bits of my research which are relevant, extra bits about, mainly about the environment, but are relevant to what we're looking at here. Okay, so the first one is, I did some research on 7, 8 years ago now maybe, with one of my PhD students, and the reason I was doing it was because it was fairly obvious by that point that we don't need to teach as much information to people as we used to. Okay, so we don't need to focus on lots and lots of information for the learner. Okay, rote learning still has its place, but certainly not in universities. Okay, and the reason is because we have things like Google, we have things like Wikipedia. Okay, they can find out, any of the students, any of the academics can find out whatever they want in an instant. Okay, so if that's the case, what's the role of the teacher?
Skills development.
Yes, skills development. In what way?
Soft skills development, taking what you're learning to actually apply it to be useful rather than useful in the knowledge itself.
Okay, so application, good. What else?
The ability to discern what is useful information and what perhaps less useless.
Okay, judgment.
Critical.
Yeah, critical judgment. Okay. Okay, so just on a slight aside on that, let's ask another question because it's similar. The answer is similar. So you've got part of the answer already. What's the purpose of a university degree? Why do people do a university degree?
Depends if you ask the student or the lecturer. The student sees it as a ticket.
Yeah, to get a job.
Now they're actually not really concerned about what they learn, just as long as they get a piece of paper to get the job.
Okay.
Academics are seeing it as trying to encourage you and develop you in that area of knowledge,
Okay.
you know, and excite you about that discipline.
Yeah.
And those are often not the same.
Not the same
goals.
thing. Exactly. The intention of the.
Where you get the question, what must I learn?
Yes.
What is the minimum?
Okay.
This is your career. Your life.
Okay. So yeah, spot on. Go on. But what else? Why? What is the purpose? That is the two viewpoints. But I think there is an answer to what is the university degree there for.
I think it's exactly what he's saying. It's to specialize in a field, because you probably know a lot about everything, but to know more about a specialist field, you'll have to learn, more in that field.
Okay, but you could do a training course to do that. So what's the difference between a training course and a degree?
Now, I would say a university degree is about developing thinkers. It's all about, and I keep saying to my students, the content I'm teaching you is actually not really important. I'm trying to teach you to become thinkers in this, because by the time you leave me, this is mostly going to be irrelevant. And you need to become, using the phrase lifelong learners, you need to become your own learner.
Yeah, you do.
And it's trying to develop those types of skills around the content.
It is. Okay, okay. So I'll give you my answer, because it might be you might or might not agree with this. It's about developing an informed viewpoint. So it's about being able to, coming back to what you were saying, take information, understand what is factual information, what can be relied on, what can't be, and to then be able to use that to be able to have an opinion, to be able to say something about something that's based on, you know, rationalism. It's based on what we know. Right? Okay? So somebody who is a graduate should be able to, you should be able to ask them a question about something and say, well, I might not know, but I'll go and find out, and I'll come back to you with an answer. Yeah? So it is that thinker, it's also about knowing the context within it, so it is about the soft skills, and it is about the application. Okay, but so if that's the context of why they're doing the degree, basically we don't need to be focusing, as we have been, on providing the information for the informed viewpoint. What we need to be doing is developing the skills, the applications that allow them to be effective in doing that. Okay, and so really the role of the teacher is to facilitate learning. It's to guide learning. It's to use their expertise, and coming back to the diagram here actually, if you're an expert, you've got better abstractions, you've got better conceptual understanding of things. Okay? You understand how things fit together better. Because you've learnt more, you've practiced more, you see things differently. So, to use a medical example, okay? If you have a trainee doctor and you have an experienced consultant, okay, and the consultant and the trainee doctor are going to see a patient, the diagnosis will be different of what the condition is. Okay? The consultant will generally be right and the trainee doctor will be wrong. Okay? Why? One reason, they'll have less information. Okay? So they won't know as much. Second one is their filing system will be far poorer. They won't know what bits to connect with which and what to retrieve, which is based on the abstraction. Okay? Right. So, the expertise that you have that you should be using with the students is about guiding them effectively. Okay? So this research was about power relationships within student-lecturer relationships. So basically, how did they see their role with their lecturer? But the more broader point of it is about where do you provide power to them? So where should they be empowered? And where should you be providing the support? Okay? And really what we should be moving towards across education, and certainly in universities, is it's about them as lifelong learners, as independent learners, being empowered. And so your role is not to teach, your role is to facilitate learning. And the sooner we move to that, the better. Okay? So, clearly, your expert power, your expertise is really important. Referent power is about how much they respect you. They'll respect you if you know what you're talking about. Okay? They'll also respect you if you're helping them to learn. If they're learning rather than being taught, they'll develop self-confidence because they'll go through those virtuous cycles and feel they're making progress. They'll become more self-reliant. You can engage them more with each other and support each other. So actually it makes the learning process more enjoyable, and they feel more connected to where they're learning. Okay, so that's one example from the research that's really important. Okay, second one. Thinking about the learning environment. Okay, so this is some research I did in the US, which was, I was originally looking at how technology could be used in academic advising. So in the American system, I'll do a brief summary. In the American system, they have generally a liberal arts structure in American universities if you've not been. So they do a range of general education courses, and they can either specialise in a particular area or they can be undecided and try different things. Okay, so it's a great structure if you are a very capable learner because you can explore lots of different things. You've got a curious mind, you can get on and do stuff. If you are somebody that's not got that learning fitness, it can be a real struggle because it's more confusing. It's like getting in the car for the first time. There's too many controls, too many things to choose. How do I make sense of that? Okay, so started off looking at technology and academic advising. What I ended up looking at actually was how they actually engage with the environment. Okay, so out of that, I developed this model, and basically it was a model of retention. It was how do students stay in universities or not? Okay, so they come in, hopefully they go out graduating or they drop out. So what's the difference between these two routes out? Okay, and it's probably quite, it's an important question to ask in any institution. Well, the first bit is, on the right hand side here is the institutional communication, effectively, and on the left-hand side is the students' internalisation of that. So on the right-hand side here at the top, if you're a university, you have two things you want to measure with your students. Are they performing and are they progressing? And what the student then does is they take those two things that you want to know from them, and they say, okay, well, what does that mean for me? So what am I required to do, and when am I required to do it? Okay? So that's fairly straightforward, and to be honest, most of the time, it's not the academic stuff that's the problem. Okay? It's this other stuff. It's the non-academic side. So in terms of the non-academic side, the institution wants to support you. It wants to help you cope, the soft skills. It wants to help you cope with being at university, because it's a different environment. It wants to tell you things, too many things. And it wants you to feel bonded with your other students and with the institution. So what do you do as a student? Well, you try and make sense of the support that they're providing, and you try and manage yourself within your learning. So you try and manage your finances. You try and manage your timescales for getting work done. You try and make sense. You translate the information that they provide, or at least some of it. And you hopefully identify with your institution, with your fellow students, with where you are, because that bonding is really important. If we don't feel part of the community, we're much more likely to drop out. Okay, so that's sort of the interactions that are going on. And through that, what you effectively develop is what I've termed educational fluency. So educational fluency is basically understanding the culture and the language of the educational institution you're involved in. So to use an analogy to make this very simple, imagine you go to Venice and you get dropped in the middle of Venice. You don't speak Italian. You've got no map. Okay? It's tricky. What do you do? Okay? You would try and find somebody that could help you out. Okay? You would try and go to the tourist information. You're trying to get a translator. Okay? You'd try and work out how you're going to order food. Yeah? Lots of the simple stuff. Okay? So that's what you do if you're in a foreign country. Now, going to university or any other educational environment that's new is exactly the same thing. Okay? You are trying to understand how it works. And that educational fluency, you'll notice, starts before you come in and goes on afterwards. Why?
You probably learn some of it before you come to university and you're at school, etc. And obviously when you leave, you're going to carry it into your ongoing learning with the whatever you've got.
Yeah, lifelong learning. Okay, yeah. Okay. What other things other than school?
Not the other things that you learn in school that actually feed the type of learning at the university.
They could.
Unlearn.
Yeah, okay, that's a very good point. Okay, what else? What else happens before you get?
You evaluate what's available and decide whether it fits. You think it's going to fit your what you want to achieve.
Okay, so you reflect on things. Yeah, and that comes down to this bottom bit, which you do when you're there actually as well, is it relevant to me and is it what I'm trying to achieve? So if you always want to be a medical student, for example, you'll carry on more because you're determined to do that, that's your dream. It'll carry you more through, whereas if you don't really know what you just want to get a job, you know, you'll have much less of that keeping you in. Okay. What else? What so do your students just sort of come to, pitch up with, you know, confused? What?
A lot of them.
I think
Are there any other influences before they arrive? Oh, sorry. Are there any other influences before they arrive?
It's obviously family and their home life, I assume, that's going to impact them, their background and culture. And
Okay, right. Background and culture. Okay, so if you're first generation, you'll have less fluency. Okay, if when you were at school, your parents hated school and they don't like school now, so you've got this anti-education thing, that influences it. If you've got brothers and sisters that are at university, been to the same place, okay, they can translate, they can help make that process easier. Okay, so you've got individual learner journeys going on with all of your students. Okay, you have to think about the context in which you're applying your education and what they can actually absorb and not absorb from that. Okay, all right, so yeah, you get the idea. Okay, so really what we want to try and do in institutions is develop that educational fluency, so those that have less of it on entry can adjust as quickly as possible to get that. Okay, because that'll be one of the main reasons why they drop out. Okay, and then yeah, just to finish you off, they'll have, if they think it's relevant and they have hopes and dreams, they'll carry on. If they've not and they haven't got that fluency, they'll drop out. Okay. Okay, so taking this back to other people's work, there's a really interesting bit of work that was done by the former head of the American Psychology Association, Martin Seligman. He's actually a chancellor of a university in the UK now. And I'll go slightly on the side here because it's vaguely interesting. Okay, so in the 1970s, he electrocuted a lot of dogs. Okay, not killing them. Okay, just electric shocks. Okay, and what he did is he had some experiments where he would have a floor and he'd electrify the floor. Okay, and then what he'd do is he'd put a dog on the floor, and one group, the dog could complete an action and the floor would become non-electrified. Okay, the other group, whatever the dog did, it stayed electrified. Okay, so then he did a second experiment, and the second experiment was he had a room, part electrified floor, part not electrified floor. Small barrier in between, easily jumpable barrier in between. Puts the dogs on one side, on the electrified, well, the side that's going to get electrified, switches the electrification on. Okay, so group one, the ones that have been able to pause it, yeah, there you go, thank you. That group, okay, he puts the electric floor on. What do the dogs do? Yeah. Well, they pause it if they can. If the thing's not there, what do they do? Small barrier. Jump over. Okay? All right. Second group, the ones that couldn't pause it. Puts the electric floor on. What happens? Just say, lie down. Okay. So what's happening? They're giving up. And they're giving up because whatever they do doesn't make a difference. Okay? So they have learned to be helpless. Okay? And a lot of us in life, in various situations, learn to be helpless. Okay? So alcoholism, for example, drug addiction, a lot of that comes from the process of doing that. Okay? But you can also learn, as you'll see, positive side of it, to be optimistic, okay? And really what this is about, the whole sort of psychological underpinning of this, is about resilience. It's about how you develop personal resilience, okay? So if you've got students coming to you that maybe haven't got the fluency, educational fluency, maybe haven't got the habits, okay? One of the key things you want them to do is develop some resilience, okay? And the resilience comes in 3 different bits. So basically what you do, all of us do, is when good and bad things happen to us, we judge them. And we judge them in 3 different tiers. So the first one is, if something bad happens, was it my fault? Okay? So how personalised is it? So if something happens and it is genuinely your fault, obviously you'd accept that. But there is a tendency for people to blame themselves for things which aren't their fault. Okay? Also, they then think that affects everything in their life, rather than just the individual thing that has occurred. And finally, they see it as a permanent situation. They see it as something that isn't going to change. And once they think that anything bad that happens is their fault, affects their entire life, and is never going to change, they're lying down on the floor. Okay? Switch it the other way. If they can contextualize things and realize that actually anybody can be in that situation, that it's only localized to this thing and you can get over it, and that it's only temporary and that they can do other things, they develop resilience. They develop the ability to push on with things. And in fact, you can take this and the bit I was talking about earlier about fixed and growth mindsets, and you can put them together. So the fixed mindset is a fear of failure. Okay? It's a fear of failure because you're personalizing failure. You're making it pervasive and you're making it permanent. So if you don't do well in a test, so you could have very capable students, for example, they come to a different environment, to a university, suddenly they're not the best person in the environment. It's a real shock for them, and they can completely fall apart. Okay? And that's insane, really, if you think about it, because they are capable, it's not, well, any learner should be capable, but they're capable learners who should be fine. Okay? And it's about the fact that they're judging themselves on it. Okay? So that fixed mindset issue is a big issue. So being able to give students the opportunity to take risk, to fail, to not see that as something that is a burden in life. Okay, it's a big bit because they need it in life. Otherwise, they're never going to achieve what they could achieve. Okay, really important. Okay, I did say this was a bit left field, so you probably picked this up right now. Okay, but it's really important because if you understand all these systemic things, suddenly when you start looking at things, you can look at them in a completely different way. And I'm going to come back to reality very soon, and we'll start talking about some examples. Okay. So, the 2 questions. If they do, does this improve their understanding of key concepts, and should entire lectures be captured in classrooms and distributed? So, the questions actually to ask yourself are they learning? So, are they taking what you're providing to them, internalizing habits based on it, and developing new constructs? So, are they developing new learning from what you're doing? So, you can get them to watch an entire lecture, okay, fine. What are they doing on the back of that? So otherwise you're just filling up their time with stuff that's not having an impact. Yeah, they're not learning, they're just, it's like some sort of visual torture. You just give them an hour of their time they'll never get back. Okay? Okay, so probably not, unless you link it with things that they can do. So really the key point from this is take what you're trying to achieve with them and get them to apply it. Get them to do things and act on things so they start internalizing habits and they feel that what you are telling them is relevant to them and they can use it. Okay? And then suddenly, they're more interested. Suddenly, they can see a point in what you're doing. They can see the relevance. And then you can push forward from there. Okay, okay, so second bit here was about the benefits of video recording lectures and distributing them online, and then how video materials may be made interesting in the manner that they are produced. Okay, and I'm sure you could put animations in there. You could have, you know, lecturers roller skating around a room, juggling, whatever. Okay, I'm sure you can make it interesting. Okay, but actually the way you make it interesting is to get people to apply it. Okay, and also think about how we traditionally learn. So start with a nice easy question. How do we learn as children?
Messy, unstructured ways.
Yes. Watch, observe. What else? Copy. Try.
Imitation.
Imitation.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this, go on. People haven't answered. What else? How do you learn as a child?
Playing.
Playing.
Playing. Oof. That's a bit left field. Okay, playing. Yeah. What else? There's one word I've not heard yet. So it's probably the most important.
By failing. Failing.
Feeling.
By failing.
Failing.
Failing. Yeah, you fail. Oh, yeah. Fail. Yeah, it's not that one though, but that is an important one.
Experimenting.
Experimenting. Struggling. So why do you
Visual.
experiment? Go on.
A lot of visuals.
A lot of visual stuff. There's lots of different forms you do it. Why do you experiment?
Experiencing something new.
Why?
Like trial and error.
You're curious.
Curiosity.
You remember that? Curiosity?
Here's a cat.
No. So if you've not watched it, please do. The most watched, feels like TED Talk, most watched TED Talk of all time. Anybody know?
Yeah. Ken Robinson's Changing Paradigms.
Education Killing Creativity.
Yeah.
Ken Robinson, most watched one of it. Brilliant. Okay, and it's brilliant because basically it's explaining why we need, well, it doesn't go that far, but it's explaining why we need personalised learning. Okay, basically our system is based on hurdles, barriers, time constraints. You know, think back to that hurdles picture. Okay, it's designed for a different area. It's a factory-based model of learning. Okay, and it's insane that we're still using it now because we need a different skill set. Okay, and yeah, it's not based on curiosity. We learn best when we're interested in things. It's not rocket science, unless it is rocket science, in which case obviously we need to be interested in that. Okay, so let's come back to that. You know, if the barriers really are our own making because we're making things uninteresting. We're not providing the space to be curious and to explore. Okay, it's a massive issue. Okay, so there you go. On to solutions, finally. Okay, so first thing is action learning. Get them to do something. Please, please, please get them to do something. Integrate and embed learning within what you're doing. So if you've got lectures, fine, have lectures. If you've got video-based content, fine, have video-based content. But think about the structures that you're providing for them to learn and how they are using them to develop their structures of learning. Okay, so if you want them to learn some concepts, so let's say, okay, let's take a computing concept. If you want them to learn programming, you need to get them programming. You can tell them about programming, but you need to get them doing tasks. And you need to reward those tasks. And you need to use those rewards, those tasks, to encourage them to do other things. And you need to get them experimenting, as you're saying at the back there. Okay, you need to get them experimenting with things. Okay, so you give them open-ended problems. Okay, you use problem-based learning. What you also do is you get them to do something before you tell them about something. Give them a problem to solve. Give them something they don't know about. And even if you don't do that, you give them something they do know about, give them something that they can make some structures in their brain about before you start introducing other stuff, because they will learn more effectively. Once you have a conceptual framework, you can then build on that to develop a more detailed one. Whereas if you're just starting from new information, they're not going to learn as much. Yeah. And I remember a personal one, when I was back at school, we learned German when I was about 14. And the summer before we learnt it, my mum had a book, Teach Yourself German book. So we were going up on holiday and I had a little read through it. So I knew about some of the German words before we started being taught it. And I was top of the class. And I was top of the class because I had that bit to start with. So I could listen more in class, I could add more to it. So my rate of learning was higher than the other people. And it was only down to that, it was down to that prep. Okay, so the flipped classroom approach works if the prep that they do in that allows them to learn more in the session. Okay, so you've got those. Project-based learning. So both individually and in group, they need to be able to develop effective ways of structuring their lives. They need to be able to develop routines. You know, we talked about it in diet context. If you want to learn effectively, particularly outside of the information you're imparting to them, they've got to get learning fit. And getting learning fit is about discipline, and it's about having the tools and techniques that they can use to be effective learners. And one of those is being able to manage their time effectively. Organise, prioritise what they're doing. You need to expose them to those skills. And if you're not doing these things early, don't expect it later on with them, because they haven't got them. Yeah. So don't just say, okay, now we've spent, you know, a year, 2 years, 3 years teaching you the theory of driving. Get in the car and can you do a 3-point turn for me, please? Okay, it ain't happening. Okay. Final bit there. Think about what drives curiosity. What drives curiosity in you? Why are you doing what you're doing? What is it about your subject that was interesting to you, and what should they find interesting, or what might they find interesting? Try things. Trial and error. Play. Okay? So, all of these things I took and I used when I was down in London working for the Duke. Okay? And I was project lead for one of his charities. And basically, what I developed with a few others in terms of a learning structure. It's an informal learning structure, and basically it's exactly this. It's curiosity-driven learning, and it's informal curiosity-driven learning. So what it does is it has different ways of interacting. It's about 20 minutes long, and what you do is you either start with something really interesting, like, what would be a good example? Okay, a problem. You'd have something like, you know, so let's say if it's something on cybersecurity, it could be something like, it isn't, but it could be something like, okay, answer these 4 simple questions. Okay, did you know with the answers to these 4 simple questions, I can now find out all this stuff about you, I can get into your bank account, I can do this and I can do that. Okay, so suddenly you've piqued their attention. Okay, because they can see something that's relevant to them, they can see something that's interesting to find out more about. Okay, or it could be that you ask them a set of, you get them trying to solve a problem, and then you tell them why that problem is really worthwhile solving. Okay, you'd have to have a go, and I'm not explaining this very well at all.
Or you could show a picture if you're doing a talk on digital education of people jumping over hurdles. Or a salad and cake.
You could.
You could do something like that, which would
get them thinking.
Get them thinking.
Thank you. That's helped me out. Thank you. Thank you. That was good. That was a good heckle. I like that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I was struggling at this point. Not enough caffeine. Right, so, but the point is it's 20 minutes long, 20 odd minutes long, okay? Because attention span, you're doing very well, by the way. You've not fallen asleep or left, so thank you on both counts. It's really hard to concentrate for long periods of time. Blood sugar gets low. Brain doesn't like thinking, okay? So keep it short, keep it intense, keep it stimulating, interesting, curiosity-driven, okay? There you go, leaving now. Okay, and through that, you keep people's interest, you keep people buying into it, because everybody wants to learn, okay? Everybody wants to learn. They just get put off by the education system, right? So think about how you manage that. Okay, so that's the end of my random talk around learning, okay, which hopefully has given you a lot of food for thought. I would very much hope that you can now ask me some really interesting, or not even interesting, some questions. I'll settle for questions. Some questions related to how any of this could be of any interest whatsoever to you in your role, and what you'd like to talk more about in those contexts. So I'm doing X. I didn't like or liked what you were saying about this. How could I apply that there? And then we can start. I'll see if I can think straight still to try and suggest some further things. But a lot of this is about applying it to your context. So, you know, it's quite hard to know that, so that's why I've kept it quite general. But hopefully we can apply that. So thank you for listening, and I'll take any questions. Oh, we need the microphone. Sorry, the microphone needs to go around with you. So.
Hi. I would like you to share with me, in South Africa, in my opinion, is it on?
It's recording.
In my opinion, we have a very structured family life in South Africa, and it's similar to our school life, where the kids are under a particular teacher. It's a classroom setup. You don't do your homework, you get whacked by your parents, or you get scolded. And once the students get into the tertiary, they suddenly be told that, you know what, you're free, you can skip lectures. You don't have to, you can bunk whenever you wish to. And it's the whole mindset of how do you adapt from a classroom situation to a tertiary classroom. Okay. And I'd just like to know, is there some model that y'all use that ties to create a link between the exit from a high school into a tertiary? Okay, so so we've already touched on this. Actually, it came up. I picked up in one of the earlier comments about this. So, so obviously there's a transition issue there. So really, actually, part of the problem is not necessarily in tertiary. It's before then. Okay, so there's a piece of work there in terms of how universities connect in with schools to change that mindset. Okay, there's some other things you could do though. Okay, so for example, I'm not saying you can do this here, but you could develop resources for preparation for university that you could use before entry, and you could actually reward those that complete it. Okay, so that could be an easy way of doing it. You know, so if you think, let's go back to the gym analogy because it works in this context. Okay, right? So you're expecting them to go to university and be these people that can do gym classes and, you know, pull the weights or whatever, or do long runs, okay? And really all they've done is small little bits of exercise in a sports hall, right? Okay, they don't really know what they're doing there. So you've got to give them a whole new skill set. So part of it is about awareness and knowing what is expected of them, and get them to internalise those habits off there. So you could do that bit before. I guess the other bit then is what do you do when they get here to manage that transition as quickly and as effectively as possible. Okay, and that's partly dependent on your local resources. So one of the things I'll share a reflection here. One of the things I find in universities in the UK is they all come in the first week really enthusiastic. They all turn up in the first week.
By about week 3 or 4, that's gone. Okay? So why is that the case? A, why are they enthusiastic to start with? Right? But B, why does it go? Right? So the reason they're enthusiastic to start with is because every stage when they go into education, that's why I'm such a firm believer that they want to learn. At every stage when they go into education, they believe it's going to be different. They believe they're going to finally be somewhere where they can learn what they want to learn. And when they're not doing that by week 3 or 4, that's when they switch off. Okay? So you've got a period of time there early on where what we tend to do is give them a truck full of information, right? And we might as well park that truck, because they basically, out of that, they will absorb 5%, 10% of it. Okay, so we do induction that is, for the most part, a complete waste of time. We do some integration, and we do some support, okay? But I think in terms of what you're saying there, really, what it's about doing is actually, it's about developing the fluency. It's about developing those skills to be able to understand the culture and language of where they are now. So, I mean, it would be you could trial it. You could trial doing some effectively high-intensity learning with them early in the course. Do it on a small scale and see how it works. So say, okay, you've come here, you're not independent learners. You're not people that can manage your learning yourself. You've been told what to do, and you've been disciplined for not doing it. But now, you need to discipline yourself. Not beat yourself up, but you need to have that discipline. And here's how we're going to do it. And you put together a keep fit package, effectively. And that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it if you're going to do it here. Yeah? But that requires you to understand what that jump is and how much you need to do in each bit. And again, as coming back to the earlier point, it's about virtuous cycles. So once they start doing it, they start buying into it, then you can build on that. So, you know, this is not pie in the sky stuff. This is stuff you can do. Start small and incremental, as we were talking about earlier. Start small and incremental, and try and get some feedback on it to check it works, and then build on it. You know, you don't have to do an entire institutional solution now. You know, you don't have to eat the elephant, as they say. Just, you know, start with the bit of the ear, nibble on the ear. Okay, next question.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I suspect I know the answer to the question that I'm going to ask, but I thought I'll just put it out there anyway. You've emphasized the importance of a mindset rather than a specific solution. And one of the things that at UKZN we keep getting asked is, so what is your strategy for employing technology in learning, as though there were a silver bullet somewhere that just needs to be found and then implemented? Yeah. So perhaps you'd like to comment on that.
Well, do you want to give me your answer first?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Well, there is a strategy there. This is quite a clear strategy. The strategy is personalised learning. Okay, so the strategy is to say, how do we develop the learning person? We do that through personalised learning, and what does that mean? And then building off that in terms of what you do. So I say, look, the world's changing. What we actually need now is people with different skill sets, independent learners, lifelong learners, those who have got the skills to meet the needs of industry. Okay? We as an institution can be providing that if we understand our learners better and we're able to manage that transition from where they have come from to where they need to be. Okay? And that then is your vision for your strategy, from which there is then a set of aims and objectives that can underpin that. So yeah, that's how I do it.
Okay, so it's a related question. So if you're sitting in a room and you've got 5 people there type thing, and these are all enthusiastic champions who want to bring their learning into this digital age. They want to, yeah,
Like
exactly.
here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now, there's always a big, there's, you know, there's the awareness and the excitement and the enthusiasm, and then it's out the door, and then it's life. So part of what helps that transition, in my view, is trying to give people the quick wins. You know, the three things that we talked about earlier, breaking it down, because as you said, you've got to shift it between those two systems. You've got to get it in. So even you hear this, it's an hour and a half session, you go, wow. Okay, so my question to you is, if you had to say, you're walking out of this door, these are the two things, the three things, you know, the things you can actually hold in your mind leaving. If you want to do something, you're going to start to see an effect of this, try these two things. You know, what would be, I know I'm trying to pull it down to something simple, but what would be those 1, 2, or 3 things you would say, you're going to leave here, you want to try something. Okay, I'm going to give you a suggestion. Why don't you try and do this?
Okay, I'll give you one. I'll give you one for that. But just on an aside, read that book. The second one, the Think Small one. Yeah, because that's about the steps of doing that. Okay, coherency. So coherency of learning. So basically, in terms of what I understand from discussions so far, how do you make the experience of your learners more coherent so that they get something where everything connects together? So when I was doing that, what I was trying to develop with that, we sort of got there, but we didn't really get there, is that could potentially change the world of education, okay? And certainly a variant of that can, okay? And the reason for it is because it provides coherency to learning that isn't currently there, okay? And what I mean by that is, okay, how many of you, when you were children, were in, do you have scouts and guides here, things like that? Okay, how many did that? How many of did things outside of school, things that you're curious about, sort of, I don't know, workshops and stuff like that, okay? All of it separate, all of it disconnected, all of it having no reward associated with it, okay? This allows you to do some stuff online, it allows you to go to events, it allows you to get recognition for other things you do. Okay, so it's like an accreditation of prior learning model. Okay, so the reason why it's beneficial is because then if you're a kid growing up and you want to find out about robotics, for example, okay, you go along and do a robotics workshop, you get some points towards your reward. You then go online and look at some stuff to do with robotics and learn about that and put that together. You can also look about other things, some soft skills, some stuff about financial awareness, whatever, something about how colours work. You know, all the things you're curious about, you can build them all together. So actually, thinking about how we learn in life, we learn in an additive way in life. We add to what we've already got, okay? We don't differentiate in life, outside of qualifications, between the different bits of learning we do. And we apply them across and we move them across. But our learning reward system, qualifications, is opaque. You can't actually work out what skills people have got through it. It's compartmentalised into specific things that people think have value. Whereas actually the thing that has value is the development of the person. And that's what we need now, because in the information society, it's not about a particular qualification. It's about having the skills and being able to apply them and adapt them in a lifelong learning way to the change in the future. So the key, coming back to the coherence thing, the coherence is about saying, okay, you're coming and learning with us. We're going to try and make that journey that you go on as coherent as possible. So what does that mean for us in terms of teachers or in terms of support or whatever else? And so that could be things like flipped classroom approach, taking stuff that they do before they come, applying it, action learning, internalising those habits. So coming back to this model, really thinking about how you're doing doing this? How are you doing this? How are you getting both the information in, but getting the filing system working better? Yeah, and what can you do within that? That's what I do, because I think you could, you know, and coming back to strategy, it's the same answer as strategy actually. You know, the strategy is get the learning person working. The answer to that one thing is get the coherence in learning, because then you're getting the learning person working. Yeah, that's what I do. Okay, there's another question there.
Okay, sorry, greetings. Firstly, I'd like to add my view on his question.
Yeah.
Speaking about learners coming from high schools to tertiary institutions where they were getting beat up for not doing the work and everything like that. You'd find that in modules and courses that you have spotter test weekly.
You have?
A spot test, weekly spot test.
Yeah,
Students are doing well.
Yeah.
Versus modules and courses where you have 3 assessments, the test, assignment, and then exam, where heading to the test, the student is trying to take on 4 or 5 chapters.
Yeah.
In the other modules, you have a weekly test, so every week you do study.
Yeah.
You do prepare yourself, rather than studying towards the middle of the semester. So that's my take on that one. I'd say you put into place weekly tests, so everyone will always learn for those modules. So if you fail, it's a punishment because it contributes towards your class mark. And then enroll you into writing an exam.
Okay.
That's my view on that. Speaking about learners coming from high schools, coming to universities, now for my question, you have a lot of number of students enrolling to UTLO and other big institutions coming from lower quartile schools. And then you find these big institutions, they're on a race, they're going big. Technology learning, enhanced learning, using innovation and technology. Paperless learning, e-learning, week 1 submitting practical reports, assignments and everything. But now you find that a large number of those students, they can't even use Microsoft Office, let alone Word and everything. So everything is technological. You have to download the book. They don't know how to go to the internet and everything. They are taking a computer introduction modules, ISTN, concurrently with their modules that they have to be technologically advanced in order to do well. So what programs do you put in actions so that these students are not left behind and others are having an advantage because of the background?
Yeah, I get it. Okay, excellent question. Absolutely excellent question. Right, so first bit is coming back to the educational fluency point of view. Okay, so they've got different educational fluency. Okay, so part of that is awareness of technology and how to use it. Okay, because that's the culture and the norms and the languages of the institution, and they don't have that because they've not got it previously. Okay, I'll come back to it in a second, but one thing while I remember is, what you could also do, answering your question earlier, because you were bringing it up, is student ambassadors. You could get some of the students going back into the schools to tell the kids at school about what things are like and what they need to prepare, because they'll listen more to them, and it can add a really valuable service. And you could even mentor people, and you could do the same actually at university. You could do peer-assisted learning, mentoring programs where students support other students to help with solving the problems, right? Okay, so that's that bit. Okay, so yeah, there's a fluency issue. The other thing is there's a cognitive load issue. So basically what's happening is this is limited, right? Okay, so what you're doing is, if they don't know all these things already and you're asking them to do all these technological things and the learning all at the same time, you're putting far more of a burden onto them than you are the other ones, yeah? So it's going to require more effort, but they're also going to absorb less of the learning and they're going to get less with it, okay? So part of it, as per the earlier question, is are there things you can do before they get here that can help prepare them, okay? Could you do a pre-course that you know, if you've not used X, you know, or as even as a test that you could do as part of the entry requirements, maybe, you know, where you say, okay, we need to diagnose you, basically, diagnostic testing. So you use that before you start, and then you can put in place structures on the back of that. Okay, and a lot of the stuff I'm actually quite interested in at the moment in terms of personalised learning is diagnostic learning. So, you know, there's a lot of use of learning analytics, but basically, learning analytics is pointless if you don't understand the learner, right? So, you know, to use the gym analogy, it's like measuring the gym equipment and the gym classes without knowing the fitness and the health of the person attending. Okay, so get the diagnostics in first so you can act on it. Okay, so really important for now. Second point related to what you're doing there is, back in, where is it now, 2010 or so, mentioned in the introduction, I was part of a small group that developed our assessment and feedback strategy for the university. And we were nationally leading for the next 2 years in assessment and feedback in the UK. Okay, and the reason for that is because because we looked at it from the learner's perspective, but B, the things that we suggested now, and it's still available online so you can look at this, is different things you can put in place in terms of assessment feedback to make it more effective for all parties. And probably the key cultural difference actually that came out of that is people that realised that they could try and do different things in assessment and feedback than they were doing before, because before that point, before we had the discussion and developed the document, they just assumed if they wanted to try something new that the university registry office, the regulators effectively of quality assurance, wouldn't allow them to do it. Okay, and it's far from the truth as it could be, but that's what the perception was, right? So what we did was we ended up getting a much clearer message out there for people that they could try different ways of using assessment feedback, and that they should think about how that works, coming back to the coherence point, how that works as a coherent whole in the learning journey. So if you're a learner and you're doing a set of different subjects, what are those assessment and feedback points? How do they link in with each other? Okay, and in fact, one of my national recognitions was for a system that looked at how you structure in a visible way assessment and feedback points for students so that they could see and plan what they're doing when they're doing it. So part of the solution is you provide them with the information they need to know to make the better decisions themselves. Another part is you say, okay, we need to look at what they're being asked to do and we need to make sure that holistically works. There's a bit about putting in place the support to remove that extra burden. And then coming back to the coherence point again, what you're trying to do is get everything integrated so that they're learning as a whole. Okay, so it's really, you need to be really careful about thinking about, you know, when you're doing these different activities here, you can use assessment and feedback within there. It doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to be difficult to do. You just need to think systemically about what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so for example, if they are doing some activity related to what they're doing, writing, I don't know, go with computing again, doing some programming. Okay, if they're doing some programming, recognise that they're doing that, assess that they're doing that in an effective way, give them feedback on that, give them reward linked to their effort, and give them ways of building on that for future. Don't just expect them to do stuff without it being valued by you and valued by them. So don't just give them homework to do or things to do activity-wise if there's nothing coming out of that. And you don't have to give them loads of marks from it. You just need to, they need to be clear that there's some benefit in doing this. Yeah? And that's how you do it. You have to think as a whole. So, yeah, it comes back to the coherence point. Who else do we have? Yeah, sorry, next one, and then, yeah, over.
Hi, okay. Mine is not a question, it's kind of my opinion,
yeah?
Observation with regards to lecturers and technology. Like I'm not a lecturer, but I'm a technology practitioner, and I've been dealing with lecturers with using their systems, using the softwares and things like that. So one of my observations is that universities usually roll out technology, you know, for lecturers to use. However, they do not educate them with regards to the alignment of technology and their teaching. So I remember there was a model which we were taught in class then, which is the technology alignment model, where you have the strategy, you have the capability, and then you have the value. So I feel lecturers need to be educated with regards to, okay, we're rolling out this technology. Not all lecturers need to use this technology, but this is the strategy why we are implementing this technology. This is the value that it's going to bring to your classroom. So I feel if you understand from that perspective, the strategy, the capability, what is being implemented, the technological capability, and then the value which will be brought into your classroom or to your students, then you would know what technology to use. Not all lecturers need to adopt flipped classroom. Not all lecturers need to adopt action learning. It might not work in your own case. But what about the alignments? Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I understand where you come from.
That's my own. That's my opinion. And that's what I feel. Some lecturers just use technology because their mates are using it, or because they heard about it, and then they feel like, okay, let me try out. It's fine. You can experiment, but you don't have to like, yes, I must use it because someone else is using it, or because the faculty have access to use it. You can probe them, like, okay, this in my own case, this is what I have observed with using this technology in my class. Why must I use it? You don't have to force this technology on me to use in the classroom.
Okay, right. So
that's just my own observation and opinion, you know.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's a good point. Right. I've hardly mentioned technology. Why?
Not about the technology itself, but how you see that's fitting into it.
Yeah, it's how it fits in. Go on, what you said. Mindset. And if you're going to use technology, what it's actually about, it's about the process. So what are you trying to achieve? Okay? So rather than say, okay, we're going to introduce this technology, okay? Start off with, what are we trying to achieve? Right? What are we trying to do? What's the process? What you know, a strategy even. What's the process? Right? Once you've got the process, then you say, okay, can technology help here? Yes or no? If so, how? And what do we do with it? Okay? So if you start from that point of view, then you never really get this problem of imposition of technology. But that requires those that would impose to understand that, okay? Which requires communication and understanding. But assuming that is the case, what you do is start with, what's the learner need? Then, what does the lecturer need, or the staff that are supporting it need? Work out what those processes are, then see what role technology has. That's it. Simple. Simple. You don't, you know, it's not the other way. Right? So just start with that and you get rid of that problem. Okay, and it's why I've not talked about technology, because it is utterly pointless to talk about technology and technology-enhanced learning, because technology will change, and actually what he's trying to deal with is more fundamental things than the technology. The technology is just something to apply to it. Okay.
Thank you. I don't think this is working.
Yeah, it is. It's working.
It is. Okay. I wanted to just make an observation. I'm not a lecturer, by the way, but
what do you do?
I'm a journalist. I'm in PR.
Oh, okay.
But from an point of view of a student, because I've studied here at UKZN, and I really think this question of a mindset is very important, because we find that most of our lecturers themselves, they don't have this mindset. So how are they going to teach it to the students? Sometimes you're in class and you're still reading about a book that was written years ago that's not even practical to what's happening currently. One. Two, sometimes you think about it of, only I can have access to this maybe via podcasting or something later on, you know, in reference just to watch for myself. But we don't have, some of our lecturers don't even know how to use the technology themselves. They'll be asking students, how do I do this? How do I go on Moodle? But they are supposed to know this themselves. So I don't know if maybe at UKZN there could be maybe, I don't know, a body or that also helps from a lecturer perspective? I know we've got
Okay.
Dr. Craig Blewett here, who's also very good in terms of e-learning. Maybe set up a body that will help from the lecturer's perspective first.
So let me just share a few thoughts on this. So assessment and feedback, when we did the assessment and feedback, we did exactly that. We put in place support structures to do it. Right. There's probably two things going on there. Probably two. There might be more. Let's see. One is fear. Okay? So, you know, you've been working, you've been doing things. You get more disconnected from what you're doing, or you go with a safe option. Okay? So you maybe don't feel confident with it, you don't feel you can engage. Okay, so that's one issue. The second one is what I was saying at the end. It's about people actually want to learn. Okay, everybody wants to learn. The issue is how we package it up in a way that they can engage with it. Okay, so going back to the hurdles, okay, that's what's happening with lecturers. They're not even getting on the racetrack. They might not even be in the stadium, okay? Because it's easier to have a, oh, I've got an injury, I'm not going to even try and do it. Right, okay? So if that's the case, how do we address that? We address that through small steps, through orientating them, getting them used to it, building up their confidence, getting them working with others so they don't feel pressurised, not dictating, but getting something that they can see value in, that they can engage with, that can get them working in a virtuous, positive way that they can reinforce. You start small and suddenly they build up from it. And I've seen it time and time again. I've seen it in my institution where people started off doing very little. Okay, they started doing very little because of environmental factors in the past and various other bits. And all it needs is a spark. It needs something to get them moving, and suddenly you'll get people that previously did absolutely nothing that just become these bastions of change. These huge enthusiasts for what they're doing. And then, as a general point, talking about the population as a whole, the way to enact change is you start with, there's early adopters and laggards and things like that. You'll have seen that graph. But you get some early adopters, but what you do is you need to filter it out so that the majority start to grab hold of it and start to do something. Once you start getting that, and you get a bit of momentum in that, you get the vast majority, and you might lose a few at the end, but most people will get there if you start the ball rolling in the right way. Okay, so you can do it. I think, it sounds like I'm an idealist, but I've done these things in my institution. Okay, I've done a lot of change in terms of what we've done, and it works. It's picking something that you can move forward with. Doesn't have to be too big. We could discuss that after this. But it's possible. And also, as on a related matter, it's very hard to be a prophet in your own organisation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Please use the mic, it's recording.
It's on.
It's on.
It's on.
Okay. Thanks, Prof.
Use the mic.
Well, teaching and learning approaches seem to be effective, but how these approaches can be introduced in developing countries like South Africa? Because our curriculum is very rigid, and our content that you are being taught, even the classroom setting, were huge number of students in our classes, and then there's a poor monitoring and evaluation of the educational system in our country.
Yeah, it's a very good question. It is okay. So there are specific challenges. I used to live and interact with quite a lot of the universities in Nigeria. So I'm not completely ignorant to the challenges, and that was quite a few years ago when there weren't that many computers. Okay, so I know it can be a challenge, and particularly the numbers. The numbers, you know, do concern me in terms of how you manage that. Okay, so I was actually talking about this morning. I think an easy way to start would be to trial something, and trial something self-contained and small. So, you know, so you could take something similar to one of the modules idea and think, okay, how can we do something, let's say for students arriving at the institution, so everybody could get use out of it. That would be a really useful little learning module, self-contained little learning module that is made up of interactive web-based elements. Okay, so it could be free text that has to match certain things. It could be radio buttons, checkboxes. It could be moving objects, dragging and dropping objects. Okay, different little simple things that you could do. It doesn't require it to be too complex. But interactive, fun and engaging, okay? And you start off with just one thing and you trial it, you know, maybe with a group or maybe across the institution and get feedback on it, see how it works. You know, something that they could use when they're here on campus, or if they have access off campus, they could use it there. But, you know, you've got rooms of computers that they can access. So it's not that it's not that they can't access things. It's that it's just a bit more challenging because of the numbers and various other bits. So in that situation, what you want to do is think very smartly about what can be done to give valuable assessment and feedback with limited staff engagement in that process. Okay, and just doing multiple choice tests, for example, is not going to provide that. Okay, because all you're doing with multiple choice tests is testing theory. Okay, so basically you're testing wherever it is. You're testing this bit, you're not testing the habits. Okay, so you're not getting them applying the learning. Yeah? Yeah, so you've got to really think about how you're doing it. And the other thing is you can do, you know, you want them to be independent learners, okay? And yes, there's this issue about them not being independent learners before they arrive here and it being a transition. But if you don't start that transition till year 3 or whatever, or year 4, you know, you make it harder on them and they're getting less out of it and you're getting less out of it. So think about what you can introduce early and build the habits in, you know. So again, this thing about coherence of the learning journey, both in a year and across the course. Are there things you can do to manage those transitions of their learning through the degree better than you already do? What are they and how do you do them? Okay, and then think about, okay, what the process is, what can we do within the resource constraints and the size of the classes and things like that, and then how do we implement it? And then finally, right at the end, okay, what technology is useful and how do we put it in place? Yeah, that's the way to do it. Okay, is that someone? Yep.
Yeah, for me it's more of a statement than a question. I think UKZN's intentions are in a good direction. Just by having this workshop, we're already just thinking about technology and how it can be implemented. But just in line with UKZN's new strategic plans, we have to eventually collaborate with potential employers of our students to see how can we create these job-ready students. And I think one of the important things is just to recognize the technological advances that there are now, and we have to gear our syllabus and our content that we're teaching the students to now be in line with that of an employer's goals and what they require of a student. And I think it requires us to update our syllabus and our content. So those lecturers that are using the book still from the 70s, I think as a whole, as a school, as a college, they have to actually just update the syllabus and the content and to be in line with what's expected.
So let me throw a few things back on that, because I think it's, again, another really important point. So next week, having finished my holidays, which I'm currently on, as you can see, I'm having a great time. I'm going and accrediting, doing professional body accreditation for 2 of the universities in South Africa as part of the reason I'm here, okay? And so I'm on the accreditation committee in the UK. And so taking the points you're making there about being employer ready, points you were making earlier about soft skills, and about coherence of learning and strategy and the learning person. I don't think you could do it here, but I think one thing you could think about for here in the future, and it's something I'm really, really interested in trying to do, is develop a personal and professional certification program to use at universities alongside when you do your degree. So basically, if you're thinking about things like are the employer ready, instead of expecting that all going on in the curriculum, take it as something that you can do holistically alongside the curriculum. So, you know, instead of, you know, if you've got rigid curriculum and you can't put all this stuff in, then say, okay, well, look, while you're here, there's all these things you can do. So, you know, you effectively take a set of things very much like these, but for university, and you say, okay, you can build up this while you're here. So you build up skills in careers awareness, in preparing your CV, in interview prep, in time management, in project management, in ... Okay, self-awareness, working with others, all of those things. And you build a set, you don't have to do it straight away. You could just do one, start with one that's really important and do it that way. And you can work with employers on this, and employers could sponsor it. Okay, because coming back to a point I made earlier, but I actually sort of didn't go into any great detail of it. A university degree, for the most part, gives the employer very little information in terms of what they're trying to actually find out about the graduate. Because what they want to know is, what skills are they strong at? What skills are they weak at? Have they got the skills I need for for who I'm employing, right? And so that's where something like a certification program would give you that, because it gives a transparency to those skills that is opaque within qualifications, because all you get is a grading of the degree and marks for the modules, and the marks for the modules are made up of a set of learning outcomes that are not separated out, so you can't actually see the individual skills. You know, it's, you know, so something like that, or you could do something, you know, related to it. You could do something. I mean, we do, for example, at Huddersfield, we've got the best placement unit in the country within my School of Computer Engineering. Okay, and we work very closely with employers, so they go on full-year internships, full-year placements, and they internalise those habits in the workplace. So they're work ready when they go out, because they've developed those skills within there. So again, applying it in a work context is a good way of doing that. So if you've got industrial years within your courses, you know, that's a big way of doing it as well. And even voluntary work placements, work experience is important. Okay.
I think we have to stop there.
We're going to stop. Oh, we filled the time. That's
Yeah.
good. Okay.
Hi. Thank you, everybody, for the interactive session, especially to Prof. Ward for sharing his knowledge with us, his experience of technology implementation for useful interaction with students. As he said, the technology is not the key, but the learning process is. Thank you to all of you for attending. Without your presence, this session would not have been possible. We hope that this seminar has been useful to you and that it is the start of a journey together for all of us in meaningful implementation of technology into our own teaching, learning, and assessment. I call upon Vasu to present a small token of appreciation to Prof. Ward.
Thank you. Thank you. Fantastic. Yeah, okay, thank you. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's Gearbong?
Siabong. Siabong.
Siabong. Oh, he said Gearbong. Okay, Siabong. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all your questions and interaction today. It would have been incredibly boring just listening to myself for the last 2 hours. And so really good questions. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this afternoon's session and to really diving into some of these issues in detail and trying to come up with some solutions that work. So thank you all, and thank you for the gift. Much appreciated. Thank you.
If you have the time to join us, please join us in the afternoon at 1 o'clock in Senate Chambers for continuation of the discussion. Prof will be focusing there on the design and implementation strategy for technology implementation at UKZ, and that's more of an open forum. If you have not already completed the evaluation forms, please do so, and if you have completed them, please hand them into Badru. There are some light snacks that are being served to my right at the end of the session, and before you leave, we would like to take a group photo with everybody present. Tandi will lead us to that. Thank you, everyone.